ourselves, if you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today.
And now your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today.
Now if you just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms, I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today.
The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is the same one we worked with last week, and that is this. Love points the way, the law makes it possible. Love points the way to your good, to your happiness, and spiritual law, an understanding of how God works, God's delivery system makes it possible. It's one of Ernest Holmes, our founder's way of saying, do what you love. Make sure every day you're doing at least some of what you love and increase that every day. You know, we can't do everything we love all day because we have stuff. We have to pay our taxes. We have to do this. We have to do that. Something else. But make sure that you're doing what you love every single day. And know this. God has got you covered in terms of how to do it if we're willing to cooperate with God's delivery system. In fact, I say this. God has a bullet train to your good, and you can get on that bullet train and go just as fast as you want, or you can be like me and go out and get the donkey out in the, just move. It doesn't want to go. Come on, no, I'm not going. That's up to us. But God has it covered. However, it's God's good pleasure to give us the keys to the kingdom. But we have to cooperate with God. We have to work with God. We have to learn how to swim downstream gently, not force our way up the stream. Last week with this theme, I talked a little bit about taking 100% responsibility for our lives. 100%, not 99, not 98, 100% responsibility for what's going on in our lives. Now that does not mean, I do not want to suggest that stuff doesn't happen to us that we didn't actually count on happening to us. We get in cars, somebody might hit us. That's on their consciousness, not on ours. You know, that's not anything for us to worry about. We might get a diagnosis, whatever it is. The point we're trying to do here with 100% responsibility to make ourselves happy is to know that however we respond to whatever happened to us is totally 100% our responsibility. Absolutely. We can do it gracefully or we can do it hard, but it's all on us. We talked about that last week. You can get the CD if you want that. This week, I want to talk about something I found very interesting in a book, and it's called Becoming an Inverse Paranoid. Inverse paranoid. It came from a definition from W. Clement Stone, who was the great businessman and philanthropist and New Thought author, and he was once described as an inverse paranoid. And what it means is this. You know, for most of us, what happens is we get up and we think that the world, we hold ourselves kind of super vigilant. What's going to happen to me today? What's going to happen to me today? And it's in a harmful way. We think the world is out to harm us. And even though we don't think that consciously, a lot of times we think it subconsciously. An inverse paranoid trains himself or herself to know that the world is for us. It's conspiring for our good. Everything and everybody in the world are conspiring to hold us good. See, instead of seeing every difficulty, every challenging event as negative, an inverse paranoid begins to see it as a way to empower themselves, a way to enrich themselves, a way to advance themselves. You know, you and I, we could end so much pain in our personal lives and on the planet if we could adopt this notion of the world conspiring for us, not against us. I have friends who've been divorced for 10 years and who are still holding on to that betrayal story. And they tell it to themselves, they tell it to themselves, they tell it to themselves. Instead of getting up and saying, I wonder who I'm going to meet today, they're so focused on what happened to them, their victim story, that they actually, I can't move forward. You know, they treat it as a failure in their lives. And we've all done that. We've all done something that happened that we've treated as a failure. This person, you know, some people say, I'm the first person to go to college. She's always saying, I'm the first person to get a divorce. And it's a very negative, painful thing for her to say, I'm the first one in my family to get a divorce. See, when we hold on to those victim stories, we cannot become inverse paranoid because we're always looking backwards in our lives. When we can let those victim stories go and become inverse, we can begin the cure. We can begin the cure for victim consciousness. Suddenly, obstacles that were negative, we're no longer seeing them as the world hates me. I can never catch a break. But as opportunities to grow and to change. You know, if your car breaks down on the freeway late at night, you don't have to think, oh my God, somebody's going to come along and kill me. You can actually begin to think, oh, I'm going to meet a new friend. Somebody's going to come along and help me. Maybe it'll be your next husband or wife. You don't know. You know? If you get fired from your job, we often think, oh my God, I got fired from my job. And inverse paranoid says, oh good, there's another job coming my way. It's going to be better hours, better pay, better people to work with. You know, people who are diagnosed with terrible cancer disease perhaps, and I don't make light of this, but there are people who have trained themselves to become inverse paranoid. They get that and they say, oh, this may be my opportunity to reevaluate my life, to reprioritize what's important to me, to bring balance into my life, See, it's not the little things, it's not the big things, it's all things. Let me read you a story. If I can find it here, I think I've got these lovely tabs now, these cool tabs. Captain Jerry Coffey was a pilot who was shot down in Vietnam. He spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in some of the most hellish conditions known to humankind. He was beaten, became malnourished, and was kept in solitary confinement for years. But if you ask him how he feels about this experience, he will tell you it was the most powerful transformational experience of his life. As he entered the cell for the first time, he realized he would be spending a lot of time alone. He asked himself, how can I use this experience to my advantage? He told me that he decided to become to see it as an opportunity rather than a tragedy, an opportunity to get to know both himself and God, the only two beings he'd be spending time with for a long time. Captain Coffey spent hours each day reviewing his interactions he had with anyone he had ever met in his life. Slowly, he began to see patterns of what had worked and what didn't work in his life. Over time, he slowly psychoanalyzed himself. Eventually, he came to totally know himself at the deepest levels. He fully accepted every aspect of his being, developed a profound sense of compassion for himself and all of humanity, and came to fully understand his true nature. As a result, he is one of those most wise, humble, and peaceful men I've ever met. And it goes on to say how successful he came in his life. And you just think of the beginning of that story. Can you imagine being captured in a foreign land, taken into a cell? It probably wasn't even a cell. Phil could tell us more about that. It was probably something less than what we think of as a cell in our lives. And yet, he wasn't willing to spend any of his time in the tragedy. He wanted to spend it in how it could enhance his life. If we could begin to approach every incident, every event in our life as not an accident, that everything that shows up in our life, every one that shows up in our life is there for a reason, and that reason is to bring an enhancement to our life, to our experience. If we could begin to train our mind to do that, we would know a peace that we've never known before. We would know the presence of God within us that we can scarcely even imagine right now in our lives. I encourage you every day this week. You know, those affirmation cards that you have, those aren't really for you, as I tell you time to time. They're really for you to give somebody else. But this one, I don't want you to give it to anybody else. I want you to keep it and read it every single morning because it's good training for us to become inverse paranoid. Inverse paranoids. Another thing we have to keep in mind to begin to teach ourselves to cooperate with God's law is that frequently what we want in our lives is just outside of our comfort zone. Just outside of our comfort zone. You know, our comfort zone is that self-created prison that we create for ourselves to keep us what we consider to be safe. But the problem is that when we stay in that safe space, we can't get just what we want, which is just on the other side of that comfort zone. See, in those comfort zones, all that is it's an accumulation of false beliefs that you have about yourself. That's what your comfort zone is. It's accumulation of beliefs, some false, some not false, but most of them false. And those false beliefs can keep us limited. Some of you have heard me tell the story about the fleas before. There's a group of scientists, they're all in their starched white coat, and they have clipboards, and they stand around a table, and on the table is a little jar of fleas. And they look at the fleas, and the fleas, there's a lid on the fleas, and the fleas jump up and hit their little flea head on the jar, and they come back down. They jump up, hit back down. Come up, hit the lid, come back down. Hours they do this. I don't know what kind of scientists these were, but they probably got a lot of money for doing this, and so they stood around and they looked, and they up and down, up, down, up, down. It took a couple hours. And then finally they took the lid off the jar. And here's what they found. The fleas would only go to the top of the jar where the lid used to be. And it would go down, up and down, up and down. They could have flown out of the jar and been free. But up and down. You and I do that. We do that with our comfort zone. Think of your comfort zone like you think of your thermostat in your house. You set the thermostat. You set it to what the heat you want and the coolness you want. You set those parameters. And when the temperature in your house begins to approach the edge of that parameter, it will kick on. It will send an electrical notice to the heater or the air conditioner, it's time to act, and it will act. We have one of those inside of us, and that's how our comfort zone works. We have a thermometer that what makes us comfortable, and beyond that we're uncomfortable. And so when we're at that edge of being uncomfortable, our brain sends a message, discomfort, 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 and we go back down into the range of our thermostatic setting that we have set for ourselves. And we know, we see that in our life. We see, Jack Canfield tells a story about his father-in-law who was a regional manager for a cash register company. And his stepfather, rather. And his stepfather said, I have two kinds of salesmen. I have a $2,000 a year salesman, and I have a $3,000 a year salesman. And the $3,000 a year salesman will always make $3,000 a month, not a year, a month. He said, if he makes $3,000, because that's in his consciousness, I am a $3,000 a year salesman. That's his self-image. That's his comfort zone. That's in the range of his thermostatic setting. And so if he makes that $3,000 a year in a week and a half, he'll go play golf, he'll go fishing, he'll do whatever. He'll just kind of slough off for the rest of the month because he's made his $3,000. If, on the other hand, he's not made $3,000 and it's beginning to be the fourth week, the last week of the month, he'll work like crazy. He'll work nights, he'll work weekends, he'll do whatever he has to do to become a $3,000 a month salesperson. If we're not careful, that kind of self-image can stick with us as well. We can decide we're worth $36,000 a year, and that's what we'll make. We'll be like the fleas. We'll reach the top, and then we'll come back down because we don't want to get out of our comfort zone. Many of you are familiar with a statistic that says 80% of all lottery winners go bankrupt within 5 years. Why is that? because they're outside of their comfort zone. Some of us go to a fancy clothing store, and immediately we go in, we look at the price tag, we look at the people who are there, and we think, I don't belong here. That's your comfort zone. Donna likes to go to, she'll probably kill me for this. She likes to go to fancy restaurants. I don't care for them. I don't care for them. And now, after reading this, I'm looking, what is it about that I don't care for? Well, first of all, I'll tell you, their portions are little princessy. I don't care for that. I don't care for that. I like a portion. If you're going out to a restaurant, you want a portion. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is, we have to look at when we're uncomfortable, we have to say to ourselves, are we outside of our comfort zone? Because we belong everywhere. We are the emanations of the One. We are God informed. We belong anywhere we can think of to be. To even think out of your comfort zone, you have to really approach this idea of fear, though. I love Bob Proctor, and he says this: we come this way but once. We can either tiptoe through life and hope that we get to death without being too badly bruised, or we can live a full, complete life, achieving our goals and realizing our wildest dreams. But feeling the fear and doing it anyway, it can be scary. It can be scary in our lives. See, we come by fear naturally. God gave us fear as a gift. Gave us fear as a gift. And here, it used to be that we had fear because it signaled there's a saber-toothed tiger chasing us and we need to run away. That's what the fear was. It was very helpful to us. But now, the saber-toothed tigers are really mostly right between our ears. So we have to take another look at this idea of fear. Our fears are been made up. They're made up. And mostly they center around, I don't have what it takes. I don't have what it takes. Some version of that is what creates our fear. Say with me now, I have what it takes. Let's say it again, it's fun. I have what it takes. And we do. We do. So the final thing I want to talk about in terms of cooperating, and I could do a sermon a day for a year on ways we could shift consciousness and change our behaviors in order to cooperate with God's law. But the last one I want to talk about today is watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. Remember when your mother would say that? Watch your mouth, young lady. Watch your mouth, young man. See, we need to begin to watch our mouth. Researchers say that we have 500 thoughts a day. And when we have a thought, we're talking to ourselves. That's what we're doing. It may not come out in our outside talk, but it's inside talk. 500 talking tos a day that we have. And that 80% of those are negative. They're negative. I shouldn't have said. Why did I do that? How could I have done that? My hair looks terrible today. Whatever it is, we have that. And we keep telling ourselves that. We have to learn to transfer our inner critic, as Mitch says. We have to transfer our inner critic into our inner coach. Because if we're not, we can limit ourselves. Not can, we will. We will limit ourselves. And, here's the thing. Most of the limitation we do just keeps us kind of small in our lives. But some of the limitation we do actually runs the risk of killing us. Let me read you another story out of this book. Nick Stitzman was a strong, healthy, and ambitious young railroad yardman. He had a reputation as a diligent, hard worker, and he had a loving wife and 2 children and many friends. One midsummer day, the train crews were informed that they could quit an hour early in honor of the foreman's birthday. While performing one last check on the railroad car, Nick was accidentally locked in a refrigerator boxcar. When he realized the rest of the workmen had left the site, Nick began to panic. He banged and shouted until his fists were bloody and his voice was hoarse, but not one of them heard. With his knowledge of the numbers of the facts, and the facts. He predicted that the temperature would be 0 degrees. Nick thought, if I can't get out, I'll freeze to death in here. Wanting to let his wife and family know exactly what happened to him, Nick found a knife and began to etch words on the wooden floor. He wrote, "It's so cold. My body is getting numb. If I could just go to sleep. These may be my last words." The next morning, the crew slid the heavy doors of the boxcar open and found Nick dead. An autopsy revealed that every physical sign of his body indicated he had frozen to death. And yet the refrigeration unit of the boxcar was inoperative, and the temperature inside indicated 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Nick had killed himself by the power of his own thoughts. If Nick could do that and send him to his next expression, think of what you and I could do on the opposite side of that with our mind. Now, very soon we're going to be having Joe Dispenza here, and that's his whole research is about using the power of our mind to begin to heal ourselves of whatever it is that we have going in our lives. See, Canfield says this. He says, in order to be able to transfer our inner critic to our inner coach, we have to understand this one principle. And the principle is this. Most of our self-criticism and our judgment is motivated by love. By love. It's actually our highest self, our Christ consciousness, trying to get our other self to come along and do something that's good for ourselves. So let me say it again. Most of the criticism that we do to ourselves is motivated by love. Is motivated by love. We just don't know how to talk to each other. And that we come by that naturally. I mean, you remember when you were a kid, you ran out in the street and you either got popped or your parents sent you to your room or your father said, "Don't you have a brain in your head?" or something like that. And he was motivated by love. They wanted us to live to be another day. We need to learn how to talk nicer to ourselves because like our parents, we're motivated by love. And if we can begin to be gentler with ourselves as we learn how to navigate this thing called physical life, human life, and a spiritual experience, it'd be so much better for us. Well, I want to, in a moment, I'm going to bring up a group of people who know how to talk. They're people who have been talking for 3 years. We've been talking together for 3 years. And we haven't always used loving language, but we were always motivated by love to begin to do something for ourselves, this church, and the planet that would stimulate conversation about differences. So in a moment, I'm going to bring up Authentic Voices because we're going to do a show. We're going to give you a taste. We're going to do a little commercial. We're going to give you a taste. But here's what you need to know before we start, and that is this. You can't pay attention to the physical body of people who are in the show. So sometimes we have white people playing the parts of African Americans. We have our heterosexual male John playing the part of a lesbian. So don't pay too much attention to the package. Just kind of listen to what is going on. This show will be here at 1 o'clock. If you want to stay, we're going to have some bagels and cream cheese so you don't faint from hunger over here, only for those of you who are staying.